Hi, my name is Rachel, and today we will be discussing the U.S. horse industry and its need for horse slaughter in order to restore the richness the industry once had. First of all, before we begin, I'm just going to give you a little bit of background on myself and my credibility with this subject. I have been an active member of the U.S. horse industry for the past 10 years of my life. I've been active in all different disciplines, but for the last 5 years, I focused primarily on barrel racing and the sport of rodeo. When I first heard about horse slaughter myself, I wasn't really quite sure how to react. Obviously, I have very, emotional connections to my horses. They're like, I don't have any kids. I consider them to be my kids. I would do anything for them, and most of my income goes to them, much like children. Anyways, so when I first heard about it, I initially was an animal science major in college, my undergraduate, that changed. But anyways, when I first heard about that this was a major issue, I was a little bit taken aback by it. Obviously, horses have a huge part in my life, and I care very deeply for them. And I can admit that I openly was against it before I was educated. So today, my goal is to educate you about an issue that has a much more powerful impact than most people outside of the realm of the horse industry realize. So I hope that I can provide some clarity and even maybe to minds and persuade you to think twice before considering that this might just be a negative thing, but that it might have some positive impacts on not only the horse industry, but other industries as a whole. First of all, we're going to discuss why this is an issue and why it matters, to people in the horse industry. Um, First of all, horse slaughter in the U.S. has become an extremely controversial topic in the last 5 or 6 years. While it is currently legal, there are always new bills circling Congress and activists trying to and attempting to work their way into these bills that they pass into new laws in order to ultimately ban horse slaughter in the U.S. and make it a law. According to an article in the Huffington Post titled Horse Slaughter Ban Lifted, Congress Reinstates Federal Funding. In 2006, one such bill that was circling Congress was passed, and it did wreak havoc on the horse industry for the short time that it was in place. Before the bill passed, the horse industry was much richer and encompassed a wide variety of selected specialized breeds of horses that had specializations and jobs themselves. People had many more job opportunities within the horse industry. The economy was obviously, as a whole, much easier to be a part of at that time. But people could have jobs as horse traders. They would raise horses as babies or colts, and then they could specialize in whatever discipline that they are in, or else they could just train basic riding horses and then sell them for a profit. Now, nowadays you don't find that as much because it is much more risky, because horse slaughter is not as welcome since the ban in 2006. And let me explain this. Before the bill passed, like Ashley Rodriguez in her article says, the pros and cons of horse slaughter explain that horses either did not make the cut of their specialization, as I explained earlier, be it roping, cutting, jumping, racing, in my case barrel racing, etc., or the owner could no longer afford to keep them and failed to be able to sell them to a private party or someone else that might want the horse for one reason or another. The buyer could then bring that horse to a horse sale and know that if all else fails, the slaughterhouse where they're purchasing stock for their feedlots would pay at least $1,000 per pound of horse meat, in essence. And while that was a decision that the seller had to make, if they were all right with that, they would be guaranteed a profit. Now that is obviously no longer the case. And according to the Animal Law Coalition, an owner, like I said, was given $1,000 per pound for their horse, if not more, before the banning of horse slaughter began. This provided a way for the owner to generate a profit or an income off that horse that otherwise there wouldn't be. However, in a pamphlet put together by the Animal Advocates of Michigan, it was stated that since the closing down of the 3 U.S. slaughter facilities that there were prior to the ban in 2006, horse sale prices have gone lower than ever before, and it is harder than ever to sell horses. I've tried selling horses, not for slaughter, but just in general, and it is incredibly hard, and I rarely get the money out of them that I hope to get. Continuing. Horse sale prices are lower than ever, and thus horse owners are losing money and cheapening the industry as a whole. Now, how does this cheapening happen? Well, because there aren't any regulations put in place as to who can breed horses, what kind of horses they breed, if they are purebred, etc. Anybody can breed a horse at any time. Now, while it is anyone's right to do so, it does cheapen the industry, just like with dogs. I mean, it's like if you have a mutt that breeds with a purebred dog, those puppies aren't going to be worth anything. Same thing with horses. Only it is, for some reason, people don't want these horses that aren't specialized. Whereas with dogs, it seems like, some people are fine with mutts. But it doesn't work the same with horses, unfortunately. Now, the next thing we're going to be talking about is what is the argument? Like, why is this important to, all of us? Why is this a problem? All right, so we're going to start with an article called Reaping the Benefits of Horse Slaughter. In it, the article is explained how that in the U.S., horses are considered to be a companion animal, as I outlined initially that is how I feel, so I can absolutely relate with that. While we in the U.S. do not use horses for consumption, various countries around the world consider horse meat to be a lean meat that is high in health benefits and a delicacy in some cases even. So we have to look at this cross-culturally as well, because we as Americans view beef as a staple in our diets, and most of us know that in some foreign countries, Middle Eastern countries more specifically, they don't eat beef. They might view us eating beef the way we may view them as eating horse meat. So something to consider there. And while we consider beef to be a dietary staple, they may consider horse meat to be the equivalent of that. However, because of this lack of consideration by, a lot of us out there, people hate the thought of their old friend and comrade, or someone else's for that matter, being shipped off to a fate sealed on a slaughterhouse floor. While I do agree that can be a negative image, there is some more education to be had about that as far as what the alternatives are. In the article, Lifting Horse Slaughter Ban, Why PETA, surprisingly, right, says it's a good idea that the lack of, to bring back horse slaughter to the United States as a recognized and approved industry. The lack of understanding as the way to horse slaughtering itself is executed has resulted in many incorrect exaggerations and stereotypes, for lack of a better term. Various videos have circled the internet and have provided the most horrific images and have provided something that is not necessarily true. Unfortunately, it does happen, but a reason why these incorrect and not realistic videos are put online. The horse slaughter still does happen. However, since it is not, although it is legal in the U.S., it is not smiled upon. People are still shipping their horses, outside, our borders and into other countries to have it done. Well, the unfortunate part about that is that there are not regulations like there were and would be in the U.S. So these unfortunate types of events do occur, and lots of cruelty and blood is shed that should not otherwise be. Anyways, these videos circle the internet, and people are provided with these horrific images and exaggerations, and these are absolutely not the norm, or would be the norm if we had a better understanding of horse slaughter and why it is necessary in the United States. These images, rather than displaying something that is necessary, display an act of cruelty that is carried out without proper government regulations and standards. In an article by the Washington Times, the process is explained properly. Now, I apologize if this triggers any emotional responses from anyone, but I just wanted to warn you ahead of time. It might be a little much for some people to listen to. When performed properly, The horse feels very little pain and is treated in the most humane of ways. Respect is one of the biggest government regulations when dealing with any sort of livestock and processing of their flesh for human consumption. Not only for animal rights and cruelty issues, but as well for our own consumption and our safety in that regard. So that also has to be considered. The horse is fed and kept with other horses in good conditions until their time of slaughter. The horse is then shot in the head humanely with a bolt gun. After the shot, the horse, in essence, is dead. The heart is still beating, mind you, and this is where a lot of the controversy comes into play, that they are technically still alive. However, all others have ceased, and the horse cannot feel anything. Obviously, if we did what comes next and the horse still felt something, there would be a reaction, and when done properly, there is no reaction. The throat of the horse is then slit and drained. As the blood drains, the heartbeat ceases and the horse is in essence completely dead. The death is quick and the horse is calm and unafraid before the slaughtering takes place. It is actually true that, it's not just, something that they say to people to make them approve of it, that they're calm and unafraid. It is actually safer for the handlers of these animals to make sure and ensure that these horses are calm and unafraid before it happens. If the horse is unafraid, it obviously raises their blood pressure and gets them all excited. And horses are large animals, and they can be dangerous. So it is part of their safety regulations that these horses are kept quiet and calm prior to their execution. Now, what I find interesting is that, the death is in essence quick, and the horse is calm, as I mentioned before. And in a quote from the USA Today, I think this really sums up the issue. Answer me this: what is more inhumane, a quick bolt gun to the head, or the slow death of neglect and malnourishment from a horse owner that can no longer afford to keep up with their horse's feed and care costs? Horses are expensive. It is true that these owners that do not have the option of selling their horses for slaughter oftentimes just have them and do not have an option, so the horse goes through much more suffering than is really necessary. And thus, if there aren't, this brings us back to the issue of, regulating breeding, etc., so that these unwanted horses aren't an issue in total. Finally, what we're going to talk about next is how can the horse industry overcome this challenge? Now, it might seem like it basically has to come down to who's going to win and who isn't, as far as what side, pro or against it. However, there is a much easier solution in essence. In another article by the Huffington Post called Horse Slaughterhouse in New Mexico finds unlikely support in horse owners. As I said, horse owners are the biggest advocates for this issue, such as myself. It is stated that, as with the majority of controversial topics, the best way to overcome the issue is with pure and simple education. And we need to educate both sides, both those that are for it, such as myself, and those that are against it. While even the word horse slaughter can trigger a strong negative emotional response, after explaining why it is important, as I've explained to you, it is hard for someone to not realize why it is a necessary evil. I don't like thinking about it either, but would I rather see horses starving to death versus dying humanely? It makes more sense to me to think of it that way versus something violent, which in essence it's not. Through educating both individuals involved within the horse industry as well as those who are not, perhaps the U.S. can find some common ground with the issue where everyone can be kind of comfortable with how they feel about it. It is important to understand that banning horse slaughter does not solve the true issue at hand. If unwanted horses in our country are a problem, rather than thinking of the issue really being horse slaughter, rather let's put the issue on the true issue of unwanted horses and what are we going to do about them and how can we prevent there becoming more of them, an excess of them as there are now. So perhaps what if we created a way for us to not ignore the issue altogether, and let's not allow these horses to endure a death that is not in fact inhumane, which is what they're saying about horse slaughter. In the article, The Horse Slaughter Debate, it is proposed that instead we need to create long-term solutions and regulations that will help decrease the population of unwanted horses in our country. In essence, we need to address the true issue. If there were no unwanted horses, there wouldn't be any need for horse slaughter. Now, what happened when the bill was passed in 2006? How did they solve the issue at that time? Unfortunately, this is exactly what I'm talking about in our conclusion here. There was a lack of education. The people that brought forth the bill to Congress didn't really have the knowledge of horses necessary in order to fully understand the issue and why exactly they were trying to make it so that it was unallowable in the United States. Their solution to the problem was to instead award a grant or a certain amount of money to those that would adopt these unwanted horses. While that's a beautiful theory, in essence it didn't work because the amount of money they were offering to these people was not nearly enough. And most of the time, the people that were adopting these horses were not horse people, because horse people realized that it's never going to work. That is not enough of an amount to feasibly care for an animal of a horse's size and its sensitivity to everything. Horses are expensive, and horses do stupid things, and they require vet bills. I could go on and on about it. Anyways, these people would then have the horse in the same issue as when they received it. It would be unwanted, and it would be in the same position. The people could literally no longer afford them, and they would themselves have to look for something else to do with these horses. So that is why Obama then quietly, mind you, signed a bill to take away that law because it just wasn't working. So, in conclusion, education is the only way that we are ever going to take care of this issue. It might be harder to address an issue that we have a surplus of unwanted horses in our society, and that perhaps not everyone that wants to breed their horse can do so, and perhaps not all horses should be allowed to breed if they're not of a certain specialization or standard in order to prevent this. Rather than pointing fingers at horse slaughter was actually the answer to the problem initially, but we just didn't want to see it. So I hope that through this speech I've provided some clarity to an issue that isn't always so fun to think about. For both those of you that are interested in horses, have experience with horses, and those that are not. So thank you for listening, and if you have further questions, please feel free to visit any of the websites, articles, or journals that I have mentioned throughout the speech. Thank you.